Hello and welcome to our very first student recruitment podcast with the associates from Stewart McKelvey. This is the first episode in a series of 4 that I hope will reach out to law students who are about to embark on a rather daunting process of law student recruitment. I am your host, Janet Zed, the manager of student programs at Stewart McKelvey, and I work with our summer students and our article clerks on their journey to becoming lawyers. And this, of course, starts with recruitment. Over the years, I've encountered so many incredible law students from across the country and beyond, and one thing they all seem to have in common is a bit of nerves and trepidation as they enter this process. And our goal for this podcast is to ease some of those nerves, demystify the process, and introduce you to some associates who not too long ago went through all of this themselves and made it out alive. So our guests will share their experiences, tell some stories, and hopefully we'll get some questions answered that I frequently hear from students, and we can shed some light on how to get through it all. So today, our focus is on recruitment itself, and the remaining 3 episodes will be on the summer student program, the year of an article clerk, and then finally, life beyond articles. So let's get started with our guests for today, Cal DeWolfe and Lyndsay Scovil. So we'll start with Cal. Cal is a litigation associate in our Halifax office. He was called to the bar this June of 2021, and he's really hit the ground running in his first year as an associate. Cal did his undergrad at St. FX and graduated from the Dalhousie Schulich School of Law in 2020. He was a summer student in our Charlottetown office in 2018 and then in the Halifax office again in 2019. And he joined us as an article clerk in the Halifax office in 2020. At school, he was the National Labor Arbitration Competition Champion in 2019. He won the Alistair Fraser Award in Research and the Alistair Fraser Awards in Tort Law, Property Law, Criminal Justice, and Public Law. On top of all that, he was also the winner of the Blue Nose Marathon in 2019. No big deal. Lyndsay Scovil is a litigation associate in our Moncton office, and she was also called to the bar this June of 2021. And she's really dug into her role as a first-year associate. Lyndsay also did her undergrad at St. FX and then attended the University of Ottawa JD program and graduated in 2020. She has specializations in social justice law and public law, and she earned a common law professional training scholarship. Lyndsay was a summer student and article clerked in the Moncton office, where she was hired as an advocacy associate. Lyndsay currently sits as the co-chair of the National Student Committee of the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers. So, without further ado, we'll get started, and I should say that both Lyndsay and Cal will share different stories as they both applied in different years from different schools to different offices. So like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all, so we're looking forward to hearing the different experiences they had through the recruitment process. So I'm going to start with you, Cal, if you can think way back before recruitment even started. So you were a first-year student, basically just started law school. So before you attended any recruitment events or met any lawyers or even thought about writing a cover letter, what impressions or perhaps myths did you have about Stewart McKelvey or about big firms before recruitment?
Before I'd ever heard of Stewart McKelvey, I really had no idea what any of the big firms were in Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, or Canada. I'd met Christine Pound, who's one of the partners in our corporate group here in the Halifax office, the running clubs that I was part of. So I didn't really know that she was a lawyer or really anything about her professional life, but I'd met her through that running group. So then it was really sort of that relationship that framed my perspective on Stewart McKelvey when I did start to hear about it. And, it's a big firm. They have a lot of important clients. They work a lot. Sort of those myths started creeping in. But I always had that perspective of, I met one of the most hardworking, people at this firm, and she had enough time to run extremely seriously and put a lot of hours into this running club that I met her in. So, these myths can't be that bad. It can't really be true that these people at Stewart McKelvey just work all the time. Yeah, I would say the myths that I heard are probably the myths that a lot of these listeners have heard, and that's that Stewart McKelvey works extremely hard, has important clients, does important work, but spends a lot of time doing it. And I would say that's true, but the people who are really successful are the ones who make time to do things they want to do. And it's certainly not true that all we do is work. Always time for the things we enjoy.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to put a human face to that. The big firm mentality. Just start off by meeting people is really the first step, and that's what we do in recruitment. Actually, these events are intentionally lined up in September before the interviews or anything like that, so you have an opportunity to get comfortable, to make some connections, and to get familiar faces, really helping ease you into that process and making you more comfortable as a student. Lyndsay, what about your impressions?
Yeah, so I think my impressions were very similar to Cal's as well. I didn't have very many or any legal connections at all before going into law school, so I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know really the difference between big firms, small firms. That wasn't really something that I started to know before the recruitment process. And then as I kind of dived in, that's when I started realizing the distinctions between kind of, big law has this myth that, people work all the time. That's all they do. So initially going in, I was quite concerned about it just because that's all you hear. People work 24/7. They don't have lives outside of the law. But like Cal said, that's definitely something, my perspective, that changed as I started to meet people in Stewart McKelvey and started to realize that people do have hobbies and activities outside of the law. That's really when my impressions and myths kind of started to become demystified, and I started to learn the true nature of legal work, especially at Stewart McKelvey. But yeah, I agree that in terms of impressions and myths going into it, big law tends to have that stigma of being all work, no play. And I think that that's something that I've definitely noticed a change as I've actually gotten involved in the actual process, I guess.
Great. So you'd both agree that while those impressions, were made on both of you, that they don't necessarily ring true as you've, spent some time and started to grow up here at the firm.
For sure.
So during the fall and in January as well, there are a number of events that students can attend. So the universities themselves will hold events such as career fairs or employer panels, and then the firms all host their own events as well. We do have a few upcoming in the fall, and they're all listed on our website, such as our practice innovation sessions, the article clerk run Scoop event that we host, and there's a whole host of them throughout the recruitment period. What would you say, Lyndsay, in your experience with attending events during your recruitment, what sort of set Stewart McKelvey apart, or what helped you make some decisions or become more comfortable throughout attending events?
So one thing that really stuck out to me was coming from the University of Ottawa. Stewart McKelvey actually took the time to go to Toronto to meet with students who came from outside of the Atlantic provinces, which I thought was really great. I wasn't necessarily expected to travel back to Atlantic Canada to have the interview process. As it turns out, in my year, we ended up having a snowstorm the day of my interview in Toronto, so I ended up interviewing in Nova Scotia anyway. But another thing that I really found was that there was both kind of like a formal component of the interview process as well as an informal component. So after my initial interview, all of the interviewees from outside of Atlantic Canada, we all went to lunch with a couple of partners and associates, and I think article clerks as well. And that was something that really stuck out to me because it was a really great chance to get to meet people from the firm outside of the more formal environment of an interview question and answer process. And it was a really great way to get kind of more of the vibe of the firm and figure out whether it felt like a good fit for me or not.
That's great. And Cal, did you attend several events before you started interviewing?
Yeah. So before I interviewed for the Halifax office in 2L, I had a chance to, attend the Scoop, which is an event that Stewart McKelvey puts on at DAL. every fall, where they have article clerks sort of speaking candidly and doing a all questions asked Q&A, or I guess no questions barred Q&A. And I'd grabbed coffee with a few associates. So there was lots of chances to, like Lyndsay said, get to know what Stewart McKelvey was all about in a less formal setting before I really stepped into the formal, nerve-wracking interview process. And I will say, to give ups to the Charlottetown office, that first interview back in 1L really didn't feel like a formal interview. Like, it was really just a conversation, and by far the most comfortable interview I've ever had. So
that's great.
There's something to be said there too.
Yeah. I mean, there's people in the interview as well. They're on the other side, and they're just humans as well, and they want to get to know you. So, and I know our folks in Charlottetown are amazing, so I'm not surprised to hear that. I should say, as Cal mentioned, the Scoop being at Dal, since then we've grown the Scoop event. We also host it at UNB now, and last year, one of the silver linings, we got virtual with pretty much everything. So this year we're going to run with that again, and also do a virtual Scoop in addition to a UNB one and a DAL one, which will allow students to join from across the country and outside of the country as well. And it's a great opportunity. Like Cal said, it's hosted by our article clerks, and there's no interviewing lawyers in the room. So it's a great opportunity to ask those questions of people just a bit more senior than you and get some honest answers. So we do encourage students to come to as many events as possible, sort of, as I said, to ease you into things before the interviews start. So walk me through, we'll start with Cal this time, walk me through your decision-making process. Why did you apply to Stewart McKelvey? Did you narrow it down to just one or two firms, or did you, as many do, cast a wide net? I mean, I know particularly when you apply in first year, you might not know all that much. So what approach did you take, and how did you narrow down your decisions?
Yeah, so I cast as wide a net as possible, but really that just involved interviewing with maybe 4 firms, 3 or 4. And for me, the decision was so easy because, like I said, the interview just felt like a conversation, and I instantly felt like I clicked with Margaret Ann Walsh, who is a partner in the Charlottetown office, and Donnie Cameron, who's at the time, I think he still is an associate there. And they were amazing. It was just so natural, and instantly knew that really there was no decision to be made walking out of that interview. And then between the big regional firms that a lot of people say, they're the same. For me, that really wasn't true. The Stewart McKelvey personality and sort of we work hard, we do good work, but we don't take ourselves too seriously is something that stood out in a very real way to me personally from the other regional firms.
That's great. And Lyndsay, what about you?
Yeah, so I had very much the same experience. I cast a very large net when I was applying to different firms, both in Atlantic Canada as well as Ottawa. And Stewart McKelvey also won the day for me very early on. I tend to get very nervous before interviews. And I remember in the days leading up to the interview, I was very nervous. But then the second I got there, it was definitely one of the interviews where I felt the most comfortable interviewing with the partners and the associates. There was never really a point where I felt uncomfortable. They were very welcoming, happy to answer any questions I had. And that really put me at ease, not having kind of been involved in a legal environment before. They made it seem very comfortable and personable. And I kind of felt like I fit in that regard, which was nice. And then in terms of the firm specifically, I love the fact that Stewart McKelvey practices in so many areas. I wasn't necessarily sure what I wanted to do, and kind of this gave me the opportunity to think about being able to try a bunch of different legal areas and different legal practices and see what I liked best. The mentorship program was something I definitely read up on prior to the interviews, and was something that I thought was really great, being able to be paired with an associate and have that guidance throughout summaring and articling. I thought was a really great opportunity that set Stewart McKelvey apart from other offices.
Great. And both of you guys have alluded to interviews, so let's talk briefly about interviews. It ultimately probably feels like the scariest thing that it comes down to. The OCIs can be quite interesting, a very unique experience. We have done them virtually last year due to the pandemic. But typically they're all in one day, and there's a lot of players involved. And I would imagine a bit of anxiety going into that. What did you guys do to prepare? Cal, what did you do to prepare, and what did that experience feel like in the OCIs leading up to it? Not the actual interview yourself, but paint a picture for us.
Yeah, so I mean, you hear talk about it from your classmates, of course, and the ADAL, the Career Development Office, is spamming your inbox about it for a couple of weeks leading up to it. Of course, by the time you really start getting nervous, you've already submitted your cover letter and your application. So yeah, there's a buzz about it on campus. You kind of walk into a holding room, ADAL, it's in the Student Union building. You're sitting there with a bunch of other really nervous people. And then you just look out into this room and see a bunch of booths. I don't even know. I've never seen anything like it. And then, so the Career Development Office person would call whoever's name, like, Cal DeWolfe, go to this booth, and you walk down, and like literally you're walking through a row of booths. You can't see into any of them. You can sort of just hear muffled conversations. And then you walk in, meet whoever it is that's interviewing you, and you've got 15 minutes. It was literally like a bell would ring after the 15 minutes. So like I said, you can see why people are nervous and struggle with the process. It's to prepare. I really just Googled the people who I knew were interviewing me, because usually you find that out in advance. Got to know a little bit about them, a little bit about their practice, just to try to think about what I would want to learn from them, what I might want to ask them, and just to have some base level of familiarity. But I mean, you can't really do too much to prepare. You really just have to be yourself, know the basics about the people who are interviewing you, and let your actual personality and interest come through. Because if you play fake, the whole time through OCIs, at a certain point, you've got to take the mask off, and you don't really want to do that during articling and find out you don't really like anyone and they don't like you. So best to just be yourself and not over prepare in my mind.
Thanks, Cal. Yeah, no, you painted quite the picture there. I sweat just thinking about it. Yeah. But I guess the takeaway is that everybody's gone through it. I don't want to say it's a rite of passage if there's a better way of doing it, but it's certainly those 15 or 20 minutes that you do have in the actual interview, hopefully is the best part about it, when you do actually get to talk to our people. And like I said, it's good to know that it's something that everybody's going through at the same time.
And I will say this too, it's nice that at least you go in there, you get it all over with in a day. Like, imagine the nerves of going to however many 5 or 6 different interviews on different days, driving to 5 or 6 different offices, going through that routine 5 or 6 separate times. Like, it really is just a blitz and you get it over with. And that is nice. Like, it sucks, but at least it's ripping a Band-Aid off. So I think it is kind of like the best, worst way to do it.
All right. The best, worst way. We'll leave it with that. And Lyndsay, what about your experience?
Yeah, so I didn't do the OCI process at Dell because I came from University of Ottawa. So I kind of did that thing when I came back home in December, driving to different interviews, 5 or 6 different firms. And yeah, it wasn't fun, probably comparable to the OCI process, kind of nervous for multiple days in a row. And again, like Cal said, I don't think it's a good idea to over-prepare, and I definitely over-prepared. I think for interviews, I was very meticulous going through my cover letters, going through my resumes and stuff, making sure I knew everything on there, which I think is important because chances are during interviews, you're going to be asked about your experiences, and you want to make sure that the experiences you put in your cover letter and in your resume are actually experiences you can speak to. But then other than that, looking up who was interviewing me before showing up, kind of looking at their practice areas, their interests outside the law and stuff, seeing if I was able to make a connection there. I think that was helpful in preparing. I remember being very nervous as I was preparing and like reading through bios and thinking everybody was very impressive and being like, oh no, I'm not sure I live up to the standards. But then again, once I got to the interview, everybody was so kind and so welcoming. And I was definitely a lot more nervous in the days leading up to the interviews than I was actually being in the interview, which I think was a good sign.
Right. That's great. Yeah, it's almost like you get into the interview and you just sort of, you go from there and the worst is over.
Exactly. The worst part is the buildup of it.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you guys for sharing those details and sharing your memories and your experiences of it. It'll probably seem either like it was just yesterday or a lifetime ago, depending on the day. I have one final question, and you can only answer this in one sentence. What advice would you leave law students with?
I think be yourself during the interview process.
Great, thank you. And Cal?
Enjoy it. You'll never be treated like this much of a celebrity ever again. So soak it up.
That's true. Great. Well, thank you very much, Lyndsay and Cal. I hope this has been helpful for our listeners to give you a sense of what is to come and how you might get through it all. We will have another session, another episode coming up with 2 more associates. And the focus of that is going to be the summer student experience. So we'll hear from associates about what that was like, some of the learning curve that was involved, and the relationships that were built. And we look forward to hearing from the associates on that. So thank you very much, Cal and Lyndsay, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too.